I want to set aside the title of Preaching P for this video and just be Pratik for a couple minutes. I'm not an expert on the legal or political implications of the affirmative action decision that the Supreme Court recently made, but I do want to come out here and voice some of my thoughts regarding how I feel it will impact admissions, especially for you guys moving forward. I think the advantage of this video is that I'm not some politically polarized news source. I'm more like your slightly informed older brother. Now, unless you've been living out in the woods for the last 2 days, you've probably heard the recent decision that the Supreme Court made regarding affirmative action, and the fact of the matter is that they will no longer be considering race in college admissions. Period. The affirmative action policies that have been in existence since the 60s are no longer going to be impacting these minority groups. There's two sides to every coin, and if the correct answer to this debate as to whether this decision was good or bad was as simple as some people make it out to be, then there wouldn't be a debate. I'm a firm believer that people should do their own research before coming to their own opinion, and so that's what I want this video to be, is an opportunity for you guys to learn a little bit of what I've been looking into these last couple days as I've been following this story, and then maybe come to form your own opinions on what you think will happen moving forward. The main purpose of this video is simply to look into what the implications of this decision are and how they're going to impact college admissions based on the data moving forward. To start, I think it's actually crucial that we discuss the fact that this is actually not the first time that race-based admissions is being eliminated from the college admissions process. In fact, as of 2023, there are 9 other states, including California and Florida, that have removed race-based admissions from all of their public schools. California is a fantastic case study in this. So let's take a look at what happened when they removed race-based admissions in 1998. So the Wall Street Journal actually released a fantastic video on this. This graph is basically just explaining that Proposition 209 is the removal of race-based admissions in public schools in California, and it was originally released in or created in 1996, but then they put it into practice by 1998. So this study that they're going to talk about in this video basically goes in depth explaining what some of the implications of this were. I'm just going to play a short clip so we can get some of the context.
What he found was that Black and Hispanic enrollments at more selective schools like Berkeley dramatically fell when they couldn't include race in their admissions process. Moderately selective schools had almost no change, but enrollment at less selective schools actually rose.
So what they just go on to explain in this video is that there is effectively a cascade effect. When example in this video is these Black students don't get admitted to the top of the line institution, and for example, they're talking about UC Berkeley, which was one of the big schools that was impacted by this change in the late 90s. They end up going to slightly less selective institutions, and that has a ripple effect throughout their lives. This study digs deep into the implications of students going to slightly less prestigious universities. I think sometimes in the news they just like to state that it's as simple as that, but that's not what the data shows. For example, one of the main implications is that the graduation rates from colleges tended to decrease. The number of students who went on to go to graduate school also decreased, and eventually the actual incomes, the wages of these people in these particular communities, in these Black communities, also decreased. My point here is not to bolster either side, it's just to say that the societal implications and what actually happens in reality because of a decision like this go a lot deeper than what the surface level analysis might seem. The ideal solution that I'm noticing people talk about online is that just playing with affirmative action and these things at a high level is not targeting the real problem. The ideal solution is to dig deep at the roots and to start trying to provide resources for lower income communities, for minority communities, to try to uplift them from the K through 12 education system from the beginning and eventually level the playing field. However, I'm not an expert in this, and it's a little bit beyond the scope of what we're looking at. Let's bring it back to something that is in the scope of what we're looking at. For example, legacy admissions. Now take a look at this study. You've probably seen it before. It's from 2019, but it's true, right? For Harvard University, they found that 43% of white students are legacy, athlete, and related to donors and staff. High-income, privileged students have a clear advantage in this college admissions process, but as much as Harvard comes out and publicly says that they're working to create a more diverse, authentic, rich campus, how much are they doing about this? I don't know. This is also not just the case at Harvard, this is the case across Ivy League universities. The number typically comes out to between 25 to 35% of certain privileged groups are able to have an advantage. Now, whether or not this is going to change in the future based on whether these people have a lot of power through giving things like endowments and donations, and who knows what impact having a parent who works at Harvard is going to have in the admissions departments. But the matter of fact is, it's really interesting to see where this is going to go in the next couple of years, because if such radical changes are happening to something like affirmative action, which a couple years ago, I don't think anyone really saw this change coming. We'll see what happens to legacy and such in the near future as well. I don't think people are just going to let this slide for decades to come. But okay, Pratik, this is long term. What about now? What are the alternatives to race-based admissions that people are talking about? The most common thing that these news sources are bringing up is this idea of income-based admissions, and in that regard, they'd have some way of factoring in financial income and going about doing admissions that way. And the studies have shown that with some universities who have looked into something like this, I believe Georgetown is one of those schools, that it does work to some extent to promote diversity, but of course, if you're specifically looking at racial diversity, nothing is going to be as good as race-based admissions. I would actually be pretty surprised if within the next 1 to 2 admission cycles, they actually roll out like a full-based income admissions scheme, because just practically speaking, there is a lot that goes into it. Potentially, they could do some high-level work by maybe considering the FAFSA forms that you submit for financial aid a little bit more seriously and using that to play into this. But do I think that it's going to have as much of an implication or impact that race-based admissions did? No. Another thing that we definitely want to talk about, which was one of the first things that even came to my mind when the story came out, is this idea of what are colleges actually going to do about race? We know that it's now effectively like illegal to be considering this as a direct factor in admission. But what does that mean? When it comes to these colleges, we have to just put our trust in them that they're going to be going about this admissions process the right way. Because even if they were to take a slightly more extreme measure and just remove race as a question that they ask you on your college application, it's not that they don't know what race you are. For a lot of students, they are still able to see things like your name, your activities, if any are related to cultural events. Things like even the languages that you state that you're fluent in can all give away your race and ethnicity to colleges, and they'll have this data for the majority of students. It doesn't take much digging in to try to take an educated guess as to what ethnicity the student is. Legally, they can't do anything, but I'm a natural skeptic, and so this is just something that's in my head, is the fact that colleges are not race blind. They still know. It's more what they're going to do with it moving forward to try to comply with the new rules. Also, I've never really been one to trust colleges. I think that first and foremost, over education, they are a business, especially when it comes to private colleges. They do a lot of shitty things behind the scenes to boost their own revenue. If we just take a school like Harvard, for instance, for example, if moving forward, because of these new rules, they have a significant decrease in, say, Black and Hispanic applicants to their college, and that starts to impact their admissions numbers, admissions rates, their marketing to other people, the amount of income that's just generated from applications, I know for a fact that their marketing team behind the scenes is going to be punching walls, trying to come up with new ways to get people to apply again. They're not just going to give up super easily and just allow these new rules to just take control of our organization. Moving on to our next topic, a question that you might have had at this point in the video is what happens if a student just tells colleges their race? Now, actually, how the wording of these new affirmative action rules comes into play is that if a student is to bring up their race-related stories, is in particular what they're talking about, in the form of their college essays, well then the rules slightly shift. If students are to talk about in their personal statement essay, for instance, some of the struggles that they've dealt with over the years because of their race, the challenges that they've gone through, that's something that admissions officers can still consider and still even give an advantage to. On one side, I mean, you could argue that this is a good thing, but at the same time, we need to think very practically about this. If you're a minority student, and this is the outcome of the affirmative action rules, that you have to write your personal statement essay or write a paragraph in your additional information section talking about how hard it's been for you to grow up this particular ethnicity or in this income class, that's not really fair to the students. An individual who might have written about some kind of humorous, fun, lighthearted experience that showcases their true personality or curiosity or humor in their childhood is now being forced to explicitly talk about the hardships that they've been through in a way that they might not want to do. I don't want to jump to conclusions at all, but sometimes some of the difficulties that people go through in their life they don't want to have to talk about. They don't want to share with colleges, and just reliving those whole experiences in an attempt to write a college essay and having to go through some of those like emotions associated with them, that's also not the best here, right? And what about the flip side of this? Let's say you are an Asian American student. I know a lot of Asian American students like to write about their experiences growing up as well, because we have our own cultural situation that leads us to becoming who we are. What are the implications for these students? Is it going to help their admission? Is it going to hurt their admission chances because now they're openly admitting to their ethnicity? And in a really weird way, if you're trying to compare the trauma that two different students have gone through, how are you actually going to do that as an admissions officer? It's too early to tell what the outcome of all of these different factors is going to be, but I will say this. The next upcoming admission cycle for you students, it's going to be extremely interesting to see what happens. Best believe I'm going to keep following the story and let you all know what happens in the future. That's going to be it for this video. Thank you all for watching. Peace.